Okay, let's get started on the first I-13 requirement, student invitation. Can you comment about the transition requirement that a student must be invited to the IEP team where transition services are discussed?
Okay. Student invitation. Every student of IEP age, and here in the state of New Hampshire, that means beginning at age 14, every student must be invited to attend their IEP meeting. Now, interestingly, this requirement actually came about under IDEA of 1990 when transition was first mandated. So it's not a new requirement by any means. In many instances, the issues, and you talk about issues related to this requirement, was one of documentation of the student's invitation. How do we document that the student was invited? Documentation sometimes took the form of a district including the student's name on the parent notice. And so then the question became one of, is the parent notice an actual invitation to the student to their IEP meeting? Well, my belief is if the student's name is on the parent notice, such as Dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith and David, then that could be considered documentation of student invitation. But then part of the question is a notice an invitation? And my belief is a notice is not an invitation. There are two separate issues altogether. One of the questions that people have to ask is, do they really want the student to be there? Because if they want the student to be there, then they must invite the student. That's the first step, is to invite the student to the IEP meeting. The second thing is that if we invite the student, what do we expect to have happen? Well, the student might actually come. And if the student comes, then what do we expect to have happen? Well, if the student comes, then the student might actually talk, and then they might talk about themselves. And so the intent behind, I think, the invitation, the requirement to invite the students to their IEP meeting, is to get the kid actively engaged in the discussions, planning, and decision-making in their IEP. And it begins with the first step, and that first step is actually inviting the student. Interestingly, there is no requirement under IDEA that the schools must put into place that they're not in control of, meaning that, for instance, if we invite a student to their IEP meeting, can we control whether or not the student attends? And there's no way we can control that. And we're not held accountable for the student attending the IEP meeting because there is no requirement for the student to attend. Can we control whether or not we invite the student to the IEP? And the answer clearly is that. We can control that, and that's what we're held accountable for. So as we look at this invitation of student, I think it's all about, do we really want the kid there? Do we want the student actively involved in the planning, discussion, and decision-making? And if so, then there should be clear documentation that the student was actually invited to the meeting. Now, there's a number of different ways that that can occur. As I said, one might be including the student's name on the parent notice. Another one might be a log of a telephone invitation. Or the third, and which I find many school districts doing, is a separate user-friendly invitation. And that is where we just come up with an invitation, Dear Steve, on such and such a day and such a time, there's going to be an IEP meeting, and we want you to attend the IEP meeting. Now that runs counter to some practices historically, in that the invitation of the student to their IEP meeting occurred the day of the meeting, or even maybe the hour before the meeting, where the teacher went down to a classroom, pulled the kid out, and says, by the way, you're invited to this IEP meeting. And by doing that, what we're doing is setting the kid up not to participate, because they have no idea what this is about. They have no idea who's going to be there, no idea about what discussions or decisions are going to be made. So then we end up with kids going and sitting in these meetings in what I refer to as the IEP slump, which is slouched down in the chair with the arms across the chest, not talking at all. So to me, it begins with invitation, where we're actually clearly wanting the kid to be there, and then inviting the kid in a manner that it's clear to the kid and everybody else that we want them there.
Can you provide clarifying information about the age requirement and when the student invitation would be required?
The law says that for any student of transition age, in other words, here in New Hampshire, if you begin to do transition on kids at 14 years of age, which you are doing under the course of study, then you must invite the student to attend the IEP meeting. Anytime transition is going to be part of that IEP meeting, regardless of the age of the kid. So, for instance, if you were to address transition on a kid that's, like, say, 12 years of age, and that was going to be a part of that IEP meeting, then yes, you must invite the student to attend that meeting. So the issue of age is an issue as it relates to, at a minimum, here in the state of New Hampshire, where transition begins at age 14, that means every kid beginning at age 14, since transition will be a part of that discussion and decision-making in that IEP meeting, then that kid must be invited. Or younger if determined appropriate by the IEP team.